I've actually already started answering this question about sensitivity to inequality. But my understanding of this, my approach to this, comes out of working on health inequalities for a long period of time, where the big development over the last 20 years in our understanding of the influences on population health in the rich societies is how much our health is influenced not simply directly by, bad housing. Bad housing doesn't of itself give you cancer or heart disease, but the stress, the anxiety, the depression, it's pathways involving chronic stress that are important and which serve to link health to our social and material circumstances. As many of you know, depression is an important risk factor for heart disease. We know increasingly how stress affects both the immune system and the cardiovascular system, and almost every other physiological system. I won't go into the ways in which it shifts priorities, but the main groups of psychosocial risk factors for health, and it doesn't actually matter whether you're talking about physical health and death rates or whether you're talking about mental health, are low social status, weak social affiliations, not having friends or poor relationships, whether with your closest relationships or even going into whether you're involved or not in community life. Social involvement is highly protective. And stress in early life is the other big area that's important. Both maternal stress in pregnancy that affects fetal development and all the things psychologists have always said about the importance of early childhood, which seems to cast a long shadow forwards, affecting health even at, in later life, my age and older. Small babies are more likely to get heart disease and diabetes and stroke and so on. But I think what's behind all these is perhaps one underlying risk factor, which I think one can think of it as a sort of general social anxiety about whether you're valued, about senses of insecurity, about being looked down on, all those kinds of feelings. The insecurities that can come from a difficult early childhood are quite like the insecurities that go with low social status, and one seems to exacerbate the other or can offset the other. And friendship fits into that pattern because, if you've got friends, you feel better about yourself. There are people who like you, they appreciate you, but if you feel people avoid you, they don't include you in things, they don't invite you, they don't sit next to you, we all immediately have those self-doubts about being unattractive and boring and socially gauche, and those get to us all, particularly in modern mass societies where we're having to deal with people we've never seen before all the time, and keep up appearances, put on a good face. And in terms of sources of chronic stress, those might not be the most serious individual items, but they're the most common in modern populations, and that's why they come out in the social epidemiology. And actually that interpretation is confirmed by studies in which psychologists have invited volunteers into the laboratory and looked at how their cortisol levels, cortisol is a central stress hormone, how they respond to an experimental stressor. So what happens to your cortisol levels if I get you to do nasty mathematical problems, or embarrass you by having to get you to read your marks at the end so we can see how badly you did, or video you while you do things, or get you to write about an unpleasant experience. Those are the kind of stressors they used, and then measured cortisol responses. But then there was a meta-analysis of all those kinds of studies that wanted to see what kind of stressor most reliably raises cortisol responses. And this is what they found. If I can make it move on. Do it. Press the... It's the machine, not me.
It's a stress test.
Anyway, what they concluded from that, which is, it's tasks that most raise social. The one before it, please. Yes. Tasks that included social evaluative threats, such as threats to self-esteem or social status, in which others could negatively judge your performance, particularly when the outcome of that performance was uncontrollable. Those provoked larger and more reliable cortisol change. So it's what other people are thinking of you and judging you. It's to do with whether you're looked down on or taken for granted, and or whether you feel valued and respected. And it's part of the respect agenda. And so that's really tells us how these things get to us. And I think it's really important to understand how that fits in, for instance, to the desire for more income. I don't know whether... Yeah, it also explains why violence is more common in more unequal societies, because violence is triggered by people feeling disrespected and looked down on and humiliated, loss of face. Those are the triggers to violence. But one of the ways you can see how inequality increases status competition, increases, if you like, the pressure to consume, our need to sort of keep up with each other and put on a good face, maintain appearances. People work much longer hours in more unequal societies. This is not our data, it's Sam Bowles, but you see in more unequal countries, people work perhaps 1,900 hours a year, whereas in the most equal countries they perhaps work 1,400 or 1,500 hours a year. So, you know, in more equal countries we could all have another month or two's holiday. But those long working hours are a reflection of money becoming more important. You know, they reflect increased pressure to consume, to maintain appearances. You can also see that people spend a higher proportion of their income. They get into debt more, and they're more likely to become bankrupt.